So let's talk about Ukraine. So what were Giuliani and Lev Parnas actually doing there, and what did they hope to achieve through their back-channel dealings with Ukrainian prosecutors?
Giuliani and Parnas were part of a greater criminal conspiracy with Donald Trump. And their goal was in 2019 to try to corrupt the Ukrainian government into announcing criminal investigations into Joe Biden's son and his business dealings with the Ukrainian energy company Burisma. And then connecting the Ukrainian investigation to political attacks against Joe Biden, who was widely considered Trump's opposition for the 2020 presidential election. I think they're also trying to create an alternative public narrative to the then ongoing Russian election interference investigations and Trump's possible connections to the Russian interference. And because those investigations had been haunting the president for almost his entire term. And like the Kremlin, Trump and his allies, they sought to blame Russian interference on Ukraine and use it as a talking point against the Mueller investigation. So I think that's kind of the foundation of it. But according to Lev Parnas, he was asked to join the conspiracy at a Hanukkah party in December of 2018. And the theory that they were proposing, or the Trump conspiracy was proposing, is that Joe Biden as vice president had used his position as vice president to protect the energy company where his son was sitting on the board. And by using pressure on the Ukrainian government to fire the prosecutor in Ukraine, a guy by the name of Shokin. And the problem with the theory is Shokin was widely considered corrupt by the European Union, Britain, and the United States, and that he was actively blocking corruption investigations, apparently to protect Ukrainian oligarchs. So that's the problem with their conspiracy. The Giuliani and Parnas were seeking to find allies in the Petro Poroshenko government in Ukraine. This is again in end of 2018, going into 2019, and to pressure them to make an announcement about a criminal investigation against Joe Biden's son. But Poroshenko lost the presidential election to Zelensky in the spring of 2019. And so Giuliani and Parnas had then to seek inroads to Zelensky through oligarchs, curiously including a guy by the name of Dmitry Firtash, who was awaiting extradition from Austria to the United States on unrelated corruption charges. And Giuliani, through Parnas, sought the oligarchs' help in creating dirt on the Bidens. And in return, they would try to help him dismiss the criminal charges in the United States that were against him. So Giuliani and his allies, they would later approach the Justice Department to drop the charges against Firtash. And Firtash, through his legal proceedings in Austria, created an affidavit that accused Joe Biden of corruption. So in parallel to all of this, you had Giuliani and Parnas involved in trying to fire the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, a woman by the name of Marie Yovanovitch. This is all happening in the spring of 2019. And the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Yovanovitch, she was recalled first in the end of April of 2019 and then fired when she came back. What this seemed to be part of is a greater plot to force a change at the anti-corruption board of Ukraine's national gas company, Naftogaz. So they wanted to change the board, and then they wanted to sell American LNG through that board, with the acceptance of that board, to Ukraine. And that plot was connected to an American energy mogul, a guy by the name of Harry Sargent, who had also worked with Giuliani and Parnas in 2018 on a Venezuelan project to lift U.S. sanctions on the Venezuelan government so that Sargent's company could then exploit the country's vast oil reserves.
Yeah.
So essentially, you had two schemes going. One was about creating dirt on the Bidens, or getting dirt on the Bidens. And the other, you have changes of the Naftogaz anti-corruption board, which was installed by the West after the first war with Russia and Ukraine. And the reason why they installed the board was because prior to that war, the energy industry in Ukraine was rife with corruption, specifically from one Dmitry Firtash. So it's interesting that Giuliani would include Dmitry Firtash as one of the oligarchs that he would try to chase down to help give aid to. There also seemed to be a second American LNG project to sell to Ukraine, this time coming from Trump's Secretary of Energy, Rick Perry. And this project also sought to put handpicked energy guys on the anti-corruption board and then sell gas to Ukraine through a U.S. energy company that Perry had just prior to becoming the Secretary of Energy, he was on the board. So again, you have an unusual conflict of interest. And Perry titled his Ukraine LNG sales push as, quote, Freedom Gas. I'm guessing Freedom Gas, the title of it, is an implication that American LNG sales would replace Russian sales to Ukraine that had previously dominated both Ukrainian politics and its energy industry. So you need to kind of go backwards a little bit and bear in mind that Russia had been using energy sales to Ukraine as a political tool to tie Kiev to the Kremlin's interests for at least 10 years.
And they could have been doing that with Europe as a whole. Yeah.
Yeah. They hadn't pulled the trigger on Europe at that point, but they could when they wanted to. And so this Russia raising and lowering gas prices to get the Kiev or the Ukrainian government to do its bidding, that was in part the precipitation for the Kremlin's first invasion of Ukraine, because the Kremlin thought it was losing control of their, we'll call it client state, maybe even a colony, if you will. And prior to that, prior to the war, you had the Kremlin financing Dmitry Firtash as a point man for sales of Russian gas to Ukraine. And later, Firtash would begin investing into Ukraine using the profits of those gas sales, which he got on discount. And it was financed by the Kremlin to buy energy infrastructure in Ukraine, to buy radio stations in Ukraine, to buy TV stations in Ukraine, and then to finance a political party aligned with the Kremlin. So effectively, like, Firtash was trying to buy power in Ukraine through corruption financed by Moscow. So when you're talking about Perry's Freedom Gas Initiative, this was an attempt to replace Firtash in Moscow's influence. But the way Parnas and Perry were willing to replace Moscow's influence was essentially replacing one set of corruption with another set of corruption, where they would be able to force the sale of U.S. gas from specific companies to Ukraine. The big question that I had at this point is whether or not these two LNG endeavors were one and the same, or if they were separate and they were maybe perhaps piggybacking on one another. And I couldn't conclude that they were part of one corrupt endeavor, but both of the projects, they included conversations with Donald Trump. They both were happening at the same time. Both projects required buy-ins from the Ukrainian government. Both seemed to have indirect support from the president of the United States. And most importantly, both LNG projects were were held away from the American public. So it was under their radar. No one knew this was happening. And both the LNG projects and getting dirt on the Biden projects were also part of the same process that had overlaps in personnel, i.e., the president, Rudy Giuliani, Rick Perry, the inner circle of Trump's cabinet was essentially in part of all of this. So, yeah, that's the basic summation of what they were doing in Ukraine. But the details are deeper in the book.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for that.